chance to be heard because maybe this police officer was vicious to him. And even though the allegations against him are absolutely true, look, we gotta talk about this. We gotta talk about this. They just wanted their day in court. And so, oftentimes, just having these conversations has a cathartic effect. Do you folks follow that?
Yes.
It gives reality. There's a lady named Barbara Johnson. Barbara Johnson, black feminist from 1970s. Bad woman. Whew. Bad. Read her. Jonathan Stewart, comedian, funny guy, but he did what folks have been doing for a long time. Did the Kenny G, stole from Barbara Johnson, right? Stole from a black woman. And he got a quote, and I see the meme go around a million times. He said, if you think that, if you're tired of hearing about race, did anybody see this? You're tired of hearing about race, think about how much more tired we are of constantly experiencing racism. But Barbara Johnson's the one who actually said that about 40 years previous. She said, she was at a conference of white feminists, and they didn't want to talk about race because they thought you had to separate race and feminism in conversation. And she got up and she said, you ladies don't want to hear about race. You don't want to hear about the special kind of jeopardy that we're in. Some folks call it intersectionality. You don't want to hear about that special kind of jeopardy. She said, but think of how much more tired we are of constantly experiencing every single day. We have an obligation to create these conversations. And it might get tiring sometimes. It might get tiring. Why do I have to hear about this? Because it's happening right now in real time. Because it affects policy, it affects people's lives. So it's about history and energy. Leftover energy in the air that has never been redirected. It's not about today, it's about yesterday. But yesterday was unresolved. And that anger, that dissatisfaction, the lack of conversation and acknowledgement, not having their day in court, rolls over. And we're still thinking about yesterday. And when today happens, we're still pissed off and feeling cheated because we were cheated. Makes sense. And so we're just reliving yesterday over and over and over and over again. And then I think about Groundhog's Day. European or white America, like feeling Groundhog's Day, seems doomed to relive the fruits of its savagery, slavery, racism, genocide, and destruction of its own inhabitants over and over again. That is a matter of historical fact. See, white America, the white America is not just white individuals, it's anybody who contributes to that system. That's all of us. We all contribute to that system. Has never had to be concerned with the people it hurts. Folks used to call this worldview manifest destiny or progress. Manifest destiny or progress meant that it was okay to trample on the rights, cultures, and lands of anyone considered each other for the benefit of the few. These days we call it white privilege or white supremacy. It's an internal belief that's been validated and developed over hundreds of years of exalted existence that allowed white people to consider brown and black-skinned people as merely coincidental to their ultimate dominance over everything. It's the same thing. Manifest destiny. White privilege, manifest destiny. Privilege is not having to think about how your actions affect other people. And that's what Phil had, right? Groundhog's Day. He felt he could abuse and misuse with impunity. Because why not? He's a rich white man. He has manifest destiny over all the poor schlucks in his way. And that's what America, as an institution, has always had. And this is the interesting part, and this is ultimately what we're going to talk about. We never thought that there would be a reckoning for those actions. We didn't know that. How do we know this? Once again, don't believe anything I say. How do we know that this huge assertion is true? That America never believed that it would have to pay a reckoning for its actions? Easy. History tells us that. Not speculation, not ideology, not political view to give a damn about the elections. It's all still birds of the same bird. Wings of the same bird. It's not about political affiliation. It's about history. History informs, or it should inform, right? Malcolm X. For all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. Why? Because if we do that research, hopefully we don't fall in that same damn hole we fell in before. We start with Native people because why would we not? The original inhabitants were here on this continent long before there was an America, long before there was a Christopher Columbus, or damn Europe, or a Spain, or a Jesus Christ, or even a Moses. Native people were here. And that's a matter of historical and empirical fact. Yet, in white America's arrogance, after stumbling here, starving and destitute, and being on this continent for a very small moment in time, they quickly got very comfortable in this land of plenty. Why wouldn't they? The average European living on the European continent lived a pretty miserable life. It's illuminating history to learn about the immigrants who came here from Europe to this land of plenty. You begin to understand the desperation of those first white immigrants who came to this promised land. In Europe in the 16th century, as a matter of historical fact, the average lifespan was 35 years. Life sucked. It sucked. My son loves that word. In fact, people were dying en masse so much over there that they were making nursery rhymes. They were making songs about death, right? Ring Around the Rosie. That's a death. That's a song about death. You know, they talk about Bone Thugs and Harmony being welfare carols. They were making death carols. We didn't do that here. We didn't have those things like bubonic plague, because we don't like rats, remember? Measles, smallpox, mumps, chickenpox, influenza, cholera, diphtheria, typhus, malaria, leprosy, yellow fever. We had that stuff. Why wouldn't they want to be here? It was a land of promise and life for a group of desperate refugees. Just like it is right now, right? These poor white saps wanted something more. They were coming from a place where there was a quote-unquote permanent proletariat, or landless laborers, with no chance of ever improving their incredibly short lives. They wanted more, which lets you know that there's very, very little difference between the immigrants who came here then and the immigrants who come here now. But many of those children of those white immigrants who came here then no longer think that brown immigrants should come here looking for something more. That's part of the privilege. But I digress. In either event, the European immigrants touched this land of plenty, saw that the natives ate well here with an incredibly diverse diet. Diverse diet was a big thing. That creates healthful people, diversity. And just a little bit of that so there's about 22 to 25 million people here on contact. There's about 60 million buffalo. That means there's roughly 2.5 buffalo for every person that lives on this continent. Not to mention fish, elk, crops, corn. You know, during the French-American War, they found that a stockhold within the Haudenosaunee people of 1 million bushels of corn. 1 million bushels of corn. strong agriculture. This is a land of plenty. Diversity of diet. And so they liked what they saw here, and that's cool. Come on, we got plenty. But those Europeans quickly got so comfortable that they realized that they didn't want to pretend that they were cool with the native people being on this continent any longer. In fact, as a matter of historical fact, they quickly began to reference the original inhabitants of this nation as the Indian problem, as a mathematical equation simply to be figured out and overcome, preferably by way of extermination or possibly by consumption, being subsumed into the larger American society. The Indian problem specifically was white folks realizing that native people weren't simply vowing to manifest destiny, that they hadn't disappeared yet. How dare you? And were getting in the way of westward progress. Masters of all they surveyed. Privilege. Indians, what the hell are you still doing here? And once again, this is a matter of fact. I'm not making this up. So I'm going to read you a couple of quotes for some of our No, let's correct that. I can't even claim credit for these folks because we couldn't vote yet. We couldn't vote yet. Women, you couldn't vote yet. So these weren't your leaders. Nah. These weren't my leaders. We had no choice in this matter. We were seen as not having agency, self-determination, or voice. One of my favorite racist presidents, his name is Andrew Jackson. And of course, he was the guy who forcibly moved the Cherokees westward from the eastern seaboard over to Oklahoma. And thousands of Cherokees died along the way because that's a long walk. And it's cold. And he said, my original convictions upon this subject have been confirmed by the course of events for several years, and experience is every day adding to their strength. That those tribes cannot exist surrounded by our settlements and in continual contact with our citizens. That's certain. They have neither the intelligence, the industry, the moral habits, nor the desire for improvement, which are essential to any favorable change in their condition. Established in the midst of another and a superior race, and without appreciating the causes of their inferiority or seeking to control those causes, they must necessarily yield to the force of circumstances and long disappear. End quote. Just disappeared. And the next time he addressed Congress, he gave them an update. He said, I regret that the Cherokees east of the Mississippi have not yet determined as a community to remove how long the personal causes which have heretofore retarded that ultimately inevitable measure will continue to operate. I am unable to conjecture. It is certain, however, that delay will bring with it accumulated evils which will render their condition more and more unpleasant. And growth. Now, it wasn't just Andrew Jackson, by the way. There's a lot of folks. Remember we talked about the litany of people that were in favor of black colonization, the black colonization movement? And Andrew Jackson, of course, Thomas Jefferson, the progressives, Alexander Hamilton. There was a similar cast over here. All the liberals were likewise in favor of extermination. There's a guy, his name is L. Frank Baum. Anybody ever heard of L. Frank Baum? Okay. Who is he?
The author of The Wizard of Oz.
That's right. The author of The Wizard of Oz. Great writer. Great writer. He was considered a progressive at the time. He was the editor of a newspaper called the Aberdeen Pioneer. And immediately following the massacre at Wounded Knee, the murder of Sitting Bull, he offered some of those progressive thoughts to the universe. He said, the proud spirit of the original owners of these vast prairies, inherited through centuries of fierce and bloody wars for their possession,